We've got an interesting forward playing full-time in the KHL who's eligible for the 2024 NHL Draft. This prospect spotlight is on Nikita Artamonov for today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalakash, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be breaking down Nikita Artamonov's game in detail. He's a draft eligible, playing in the KHL full-time this year with Torpedo. He's been really interesting to start off the year. We'll break down his playing style, start off with the profile and puck skills with Nikita Artamonov. Then we'll get into the toolkit and habits on our second segment, break down a bit more of the intricate stuff in his game, and then we'll end things off with a breakdown of his NHL projection, which team would be the best fit for Artamonov in the NHL. Before we get into any of that, make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure to leave us a comment as well, letting us know who you want us to cover next and what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day and leave us a written review. It helps the channel out a lot. So we can get things started with Artamonov. Here is a November 05 birthday, so one of the older players in the class. He's already 18 years old and has been for a while. 5'11", 187 pounds, and in terms of rankings, he's ranked anywhere between 14 and I see 38 here on Craig Button's list. So probably a player who could be available in the early second round, but more than likely going to be a player in the kind of 20s in terms of picks. But us at Dauber Prospects, we're joined for the most high on him. We have him at 14th overall. Talk me through the game a bit with Artamonov and how he's been producing this year with Torpedo in the KHL.
For sure. Artamonov is a really skilled and pacey two-way winger who has a ton of effort level. He's constantly working, and while that effort level has been creating a lot of offensive opportunities for him this season, it is still a work in progress on the defensive side of the puck, where the effort level is high, but the effectiveness is significantly lower. That said, he's playing he's been playing middle 6 minutes in the KHL all season long with Torpedo, and has been putting in some really good shifts throughout there. He's quite a skilled playmaker. He uses his pace and his speed to create gaps and to prod holes into defensive structures. He's constantly in motion. He's constantly trying to create. And he's been a really key part of that Torpedo team, especially on the power play. He's been consistently playing second power play minutes with them, where his playmaking has really begun to shine so far this season, and the productions come with that. He has 7 goals and 16 assists for 23 points through 54 KHL games. He's not far behind half a point a game so far this season in the KHL, which for a draft eligible player is quite an impressive feat. And we say this every single time we're talking about a Russian player playing in the KHL. The quality of competition has decreased a little bit in the last couple seasons, but what he's done so far this season is still very impressive. And I see a player here who certainly has a lot of room to grow still, especially in how he leverages his tools to create advantages. But the constant effort level, as well as the skill and the various tools that are quite intriguing, make him a player that I cannot see fall outside my personal top 20 board in this draft class. I've been a really big fan of how he approaches the game, how he creates differences, how he's able to really tilt the ice in his team's favor as a teenager in the KHL. So I'm a very big fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're talking about Torpedo here. And as you mentioned, the level of competition in the KHL has dropped, but it's still a pro league with a lot of either former NHLers or really, really good longtime KHLers. And Artamonov has been used at times in a shutdown role. Even though it's not working out as well defensively, he's been used in order to inject energy on his line constantly. And I think that's a big element of his game. And yeah, Torpedo isn't necessarily the best team. They've lost 12 of their last 15 games. So they're not necessarily a team that's, performing all that well recently. And, they don't have a single player who's above a point per game right now. So Artamonov being at half a point a game on, middling or even poor KHL team right now is it's really impressive. But just to talk about the puck skills, I think the standout really is the playmaking, right? I mean, that's a given when you watch Artamonov. He's constantly playing pucks into areas. He's constantly playing give and go. Finding pockets from which to kind of rifle passes to the slot. Like he's a very slot driven player, playmaking wise, right?
Extremely so. Yeah, like, in the offensive zone, when he has the puck on his stick, he's constantly prodding the defensive structure to look for holes and to use his own motion to create passing lanes, and as soon as one of those lanes open up, he is rifling a pass down it. I would say that the pass accuracy in those high-paced situations when he is under pressure and trying to prod into, like, defensive structures and get pucks towards the slot, the accuracy of those passes is still a work in progress, but there's a very consistent identification of the play and a knowledge of how to create those passing lanes and a consistent attempt to hit them, which are two of the main building blocks in a high-end playmaking game, which are certainly already quite consistent with Artemonov. And the accuracy of his passes has increased as the season's gone on. I've seen a level of composure grow since the beginning of the season. And when he's being pressured and there is a passing lane, he is getting a lot better at not. Early on the season, he would put a bit too much weight on those passes. He'd be a bit panicky and just like rifle the puck into the slot, which would usually just get tipped off and bounce somewhere else and just be difficult to handle for his line mate. But right now, he's putting like a much more consistent weight on his passes, which is allowing his line mates to better be able to predict what they're able to do when the puck is going towards them from Artemonov's direction. So
Yeah.
the is a significant strength in this game, certainly.
For sure. From what I've seen, I'd give it probably a 6.5 or a 7. It's pretty up there in terms of tools. And what I've really liked is that he's gone from just rifling pucks in order to get past his stick. Right. He just kind of power the puck through the defenseman in front of him to now he's just kind of backing off the check a bit and kind of saucering the pass over the stick or kind of hooking it under the stick, that kind of thing. And that's made pucks a lot easier to catch and shoot for his line mates when he's trying those slot pass attempts. But moving on to his shot, I think his shot is decent, but nothing really out of the ordinary. It's probably a 5.5 tool for me. Do you agree on that end?
Yeah, like the shooting skill isn't the highest end. Like even shooting from mid range he isn't the biggest threat against KHL goaltenders at this stage. That said, I do see some level of goal scoring upside because he is so middle driven and he's really gritty. He's constantly trying to get around the low slot when he's off puck and is constantly banging away at loose pucks, and that's where his goals come from. Like he gets to high danger areas and he's able to get into that mix physically and battle for loose pucks. And but the shooting skill itself is not what's going to beat goaltenders straight up, especially in the KHL at this stage. I think that give him a couple years to develop the mechanics behind his shot, and as he adds muscle and adds power behind his release, I think there'll be a bit more danger behind it. But as
Yeah.
it currently stands, I have it at like a 5.5 grade tool, like slightly above average, but nothing to write home about.
For sure. And then the stick handling for me, I think is slightly better than the shooting. I've seen him, especially when he's cutting to the middle and kind of driving those middle lanes. And we'll get into kind of the habits and toolkit a bit more in the second segment because I think that's really where Automanov shines. But his stick handling supports those habits, that tendency to drive the middle pretty well. He's able to settle pucks, kind of lift them over sticks as he's driving the middle and kind of corral them back and take a shot in stride, that kind of thing. So his stick handling game definitely uplifts the rest of his game. It's not at the level of his passing, but it's definitely for me a 6 tool. Like it's well above average for me. But that wraps things up for our first segment. Now we'll get into the real sauce of what makes Artamonov so effective and special. We'll get into the toolkit and the habits in Artamonov's game after these messages from our sponsors over at Indeed. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. So give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. It's the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must have requirements, or else you don't pay. And Indeed does that with a bunch of different match engines that help you out a lot. I think the main one that really stands out to me is Instant Match. So with Instant Match, over 90% of employers get quality candidates as soon as they sponsor their job post, according to Indeed data. The candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search. And Indeed overall, I mean, I've used this platform to get a job, and it's so practical, so user friendly, so useful. You know exactly what you're signing up for. The salary's posted. There's no surprises there, so it's really easy, even as a potential employee, to use this app. I can only imagine how useful it is for employers. So start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked on. This offer is valid through March 31st. So just go to Indeed.com/locked on to claim your $75 job credit before March 31st. That's Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply, but if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Alrighty, so moving on to the segment where we talk about the toolkit in Artamonov's game and his habits, and I think this is really where the interesting stuff is with Artamonov, and this is a part that I think both of us are on the same page in terms of, this is what makes Artamonov such a clear top 20 pick, right?
For sure. Like the way that his tools work together is really impressive. He's quite an intelligent player. He's constantly trying to support play off puck, for instance, especially in transition. Really effective in transition. As a result, makes very quick decisions. Has a pretty high pace of processing, and he's a pretty solid scanner when like in transition and offensively. The defensive scanning is more of a work in progress. But when his team has the puck, he's constantly looking around for options and for soft ice, and that's where his tools are really able to shine. When he's really working together with his line mates, he's very much a play builder in transition. Like he tries to make the small passes, tries to gain the zone. He's not a player that's going to take the puck and rush it up on his own necessarily, but he's going to make the give and go passes to just get possession into the offensive zone effectively. And his tools work really well together in that facet of the game. And yeah, like throughout the season, we've seen Artamonov grow into a player who is really quite capable of using all those tools to create small advantages. Like I'm seeing him really like anchor himself a lot better in board battles, for instance, and lowering his center of gravity to out leverage opponents. He's not the biggest guy, but he's learning the habits behind what makes his game tick. And it's been a really impressive trajectory for him this season at the KHL level. Like he's been learning at a pretty fast rate, and it's another part of the reason that we're quite high on him.
Yeah, for sure. For me, what makes it really interesting with Artemonov in terms of toolkit is he's got the tools to both, build play incrementally and kind of play chess, but he's also got the tools to just drive the puck up the ice and make something happen. My issue is, does he choose the right thing for the right circumstance? Because sometimes I've seen him try to rush a play, or try to skate the puck up, drive towards the middle, kind of just accelerate the pace of play when he should be slowing it down. And the opposite's also true, where he has a lane to drive the net, he has a lane to kind of push the pace of play, but instead he chooses to play chess a bit. Um, I think that can come with time, but the fact that he's able to do both, I can't say that for every prospect in this first round already. So it's something that's really interesting. And as he learns to as he plays more and more at the pro level, as he learns to kind of figure out what works and what doesn't, I think that's going to improve. In terms of habits, though, we've already mentioned the inside drive. It's constant and it's never ending, and he does it with intensity and fervor and a lot of intelligence as well. He doesn't cut to the middle the first chance he gets. He cuts to the middle after delaying the play a bit, letting the defenseman kind of draw into him, and then kind of cutting across that player's feet and kind of playing off of his ankles, right?
For sure, he's very aware with his timing when he does cut to the middle, as you mentioned. Like he reads defensemen quite well. He sees when they commit uh, when they fully commit to his side of the ice, and that's exactly when he makes the decision to cut towards the inside. He waits for them to really make that body weight shift towards the outside before he cuts back inside, and that's also a key part of his entire game on puck. He constantly reads the opponents and also reads his teammates. And he has a constant mental map of the ice when he has the puck on his stick specifically, and is really adding an element of patience to his game and implementing more delays more consistently and waiting for play to develop rather than trying to force it to, which was perhaps a bit more a part of his game earlier on this season, and it's still something that he's working on. There are some viewings I have that have been more recent where he still does try to force things a little bit too much, but there's a level of awareness there that is really allowing him to grow that patience in his game and to scan freely in the offensive zone and figure out what the situation requires and what he's able to do with the puck on his stick there. So he is very middle driven, certainly, but it's not a blind middle drive like you see a lot of other prospects have. And one of the reasons for that, too, is that he's not the biggest player. If you were a lot bigger and playing against junior competition, like a lot of other draft eligibles are, it's very easy to just make the decision of, I am cutting to the middle now, and you cannot stop me. With Artamonov, he
Yeah.
has to be very calculated when he makes those decisions, because otherwise he can just be stopped. And that said,
Yeah.
I do think his physical game is a strength overall. Like, he's not massive or anything, but he's really, really solid on his feet, and he gets anchored very, very quickly as soon as pressure gets on his back. But yeah, he's a ton of fun, and the way that he's able to layer all of these tools together at the KHL level already is really impressive.
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me when I'm looking at his analytical profile, though, is that his defensive game is it's well behind his peers.
Yeah.
Especially in terms of his ability to prevent scoring chances against. What do you think is really the setback there with Artomonov? Like, what holds him back in that element?
Yeah, like it's for me, I think there's been a hyperfixation on work rate in the defensive zone for him. He tries to just outwork opponents constantly, but his intelligence kind of falls by the wayside as a result in the defensive zone. He's not really applying his scanning habits all that much defensively. He's still struggling to figure out which passing lanes to step into, what his assignment is in the defensive zone. There's a bit more confusion around there. I think that he has a lot more upside as a penalty killer, for instance, than he does as an even strength defender, because he does apply pressure really, really well. When he understands the assignments and they're really straightforward, he can complete them. But as soon as things get a little bit more chaotic, and as soon as there are like secondary threats that he has to focus on, it kind of
Mhm.
crumbles. So there's a lack of depth to his defensive understanding at this stage, but the effort level, I think, does give him at least a minimum baseline of being able to be a decent enough defensive contributor on like a fourth line or a third line in the NHL someday. But it's never going to be the fulcrum of his game either.
Yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, that wraps things up for our second segment. We'll get into our third, where we talk about the NHL projection with Nikita Artamonov. Talk about the floor, the ceiling, how many points he's likely to get, and what type of player he's going to be. And also, we'll talk about the best team fit for him among the teams that are drafting in his range. We'll get into that right after these messages from our sponsors at Factor and Robin Hood.
Eating better is easy with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to go in just 2 minutes. You'll have over 35 different options to choose from every single week, including Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Also, there are more than 60 add ons to help you stay fueled and feeling good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started today and get after your goals. The 2 minute meals allow you to get restaurant quality food in a matter of minutes. And the variety allows you to also address some of the cravings you may have, whether it be pancakes or smoothies, whether it's breakfast, fruit, food, or dessert. Head to factormeals.com/locked on NHL50 and use code locked on NHL50 to get 50% off. That's code locked on NHL50 at factormeals.com/locked on NHL50 to get 50% off.
Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, right now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th again, so just get started at robinhood.com/boosts. Subscription fees applies. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing, and Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer. Alrighty, so moving on to our final segment, we'll be talking about Nikita Artamonov's NHL projection, what type of player he's going to be, what's his floor, what's his ceiling, and what team would be the best fit for him. Let's start things off with the projection here. Artamonov strikes me as very much your second line or middle six, kind of 60 to 65 point producer in terms of kind of an optimistic projection of his game. Realistically, I think middle six as a kind of complementary playmaker and kind of hard forechecker, your F1 on that line, if you will, scoring maybe 45, 50 points would be kind of the realistic middle projection. But the upside, we disagree on the upside, right? You see a top line complementary player. I don't. Talk me through that divergence and why you think there's that top line complementary upside.
I will add the asterisk of when I said that to Hattie, I was talking about the New York Islanders specifically, which is a bit different to like your high end Stanley Cup contending teams, it being a
Yeah.
top line complementary piece. I do think Artemonov has that upside. I think there's a very small likelihood of him hitting the upside of being a true top line complementary playmaker. I think that the comfortable projection for me would be a second line role, being the playmaker on that line, as well as the high end like forechecker, high energy checking winger on that line, and that's a versatility that I think second lines often look for. Like you always want players to be playing multiple roles inside a top six. You don't really want your one trick ponies, and Artemonov does bring that, which is valuable. And that said, if he doesn't quite crack that into the top six, you're getting a really solid third line player here, in my eyes, if his development continues on his current track. And I think there are a lot of teams that would be perhaps a little bit more hesitant around him specifically than other players that will be available in that like 20 to 30 range. But I think that the upside with him will be significantly higher than a lot of the other players uh, that are going to be available in there. But yeah, I think like if I'm hedging my bets and taking the comfortable projection, I would say a really solid playmaker and checking winger on a second line is a conceivable upside that I would not at all
Yeah.
be surprised to see him hit in like maybe 4 years, like 3 or 4 years. Like he doesn't need as much time as other players. I think like there's a level of intelligence and a refined aspect to his tools that have allowed him to excel at the KHL level. So I think that his timeline's a little bit shorter than what you might expect in that 20 range.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely a limitation to his offensive upside, but in terms of floor, I think he's got a safe floor. The forechecking game, the intensity he brings, the projectability of his habits. There's a foundation there that you can build off of. I think the worst case scenario with Artemonov is you get you know, one of the best bottom sixers in the NHL. I think there's a definite realistic and possible projection of that with him. But yeah, I mean, there are some limitations to his game, but I think he can always fall back on his work rate, on his effort level, and on his intelligence to kind of get him out of trouble, and at least make him an effective NHLer. Like that's for me a definite. I think a lot of teams will be scared of again the Russian factor, which honestly I find ridiculous at this point. Like the NCAA is a lot more risky than than Russia at this point. Like the picking in the first round, picking an NCAA player in the first round comes with a lot of risk. We've seen it with Cutter Gauthier, and I can't name you the last Russian prospect pick in the first round that didn't at least try to get to the NHL. Um, so it's a bit of a concern, right? But I think teams will kind of overblow it. Do you see him as a player who could end up as a kind of early second rounder? Do you see that as a possibility? Do you see that as realistic?
100%. Very, very possible. Like, he's a classic type of like profile of player that that the public sphere is a lot higher on than the private sphere. That said, I think
Yeah,
there's a big exception, and I don't necessarily think he's going to fall past the Carolina Hurricanes on draft day in that first round. He is
yeah,
the most Carolina pick that
that's
you could possibly imagine in terms of Russian, high IQ, high ceiling, playing good professional minutes already. This is the Hurricanes through and through, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And our, a great friend of mine, and my former boss at Dobber Prospects, Joka Nevalainen, is a scout with them and helps out on the Russian side as well. And they love their Russians. You look back at their last 5, 6 drafts, and it's like the
Yeah,
amount of Russians they've picked in this right in this last stretch of years has been absurd. So they know what they're doing, and yeah, I don't think Artemanov falls past them. So do you see that as the real floor for his draft day production is 26 right now as a Carolina Sand? Or yeah, I mean it depends who else is available, right? But I think
for
that
sure.
they'll take a good look at Artemanov. If he does end up in the kind of 20-ish range, we talked about the Islanders being a good fit. I think that they could use a player like this, and he's the type of player that they usually go for. I think it's a good middle ground between floor and ceiling. But other teams I'm looking at, I mean, Philly could use a player like this. I think the LA Kings have gotten pretty stacked on the offensive side and could use a bit more of that complementary playmaking element to their roster. Any other teams you see as kind of potential fits for Artemanov in this range?
Yeah, I would throw in the Colorado Avalanche and the Toronto Maple Leafs in this conversation. I think those are two
Yeah,
teams that really value versatile middle six players that can play up the lineup when needed. And I mean, with Toronto, like they've drafted Easton Cowan and Fraser Minton with their first pick of the last two drafts, and Artemanov would be stylistically different, certainly, but in terms of the role he'd be playing as a checking winger to open up space for the high end players that the Leafs have would be along the same lines. I do expect the Leafs to pick a defenseman in the first round this season, but if there aren't any interesting ones left on the board for them, I could see Artemanov be a really good consolation prize. And a similar thing goes with the Avalanche. Like they always love their versatile middle sixers that they convert into top liners, like Arturi Lehkonen, for instance. And
yeah.
Artemanov is in a similar mold.
For sure, absolutely. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospects coverage for the month of March. This has been Hattie Kalikesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.